The moment Ethan Brooks slid his resignation letter onto the CEO's desk, he heard nothing, but Adrian Hayes heard a voice that never left Ethan's lips. "If I stay another 3 months, I'll die exactly the way the novel says I will." Adrian's hand froze above the paper. He slowly lifted his eyes from the signature to the young assistant standing across from him. Ethan's expression remained perfectly composed, almost indifferent, yet the frightened sentence echoed inside Adrian's head with impossible clarity. There had been no movement of Ethan's mouth, no hesitation, no sound. The silence inside the office became heavier than any accusation. Ethan mistook the pause for annoyance. That was expected. In his previous life, Adrian Hayes had rejected every resignation request without even looking at the employee. In the original story, Ethan never escaped this office. He remained beside the CEO until the conspiracy surrounding the corporation reached its bloody conclusion, and an innocent assistant became the easiest sacrifice. Ethan had relived the memory 1,000 times after waking in this world again. This time, he would leave before the plot could trap him. "Mr. Hayes," Ethan said calmly, "I've completed the transition documents." Adrian barely heard him. Another thought, quiet and exhausted, drifted into his mind. "Please just sign it. I don't want to die for a story that was never mine." Adrian's pulse stumbled. The voice was undeniably Ethan's, yet Ethan stood in complete silence after finishing his sentence. Adrian glanced toward the office door. No hidden speaker, no prank, no explanation. His gaze returned to the resignation letter. Instead of signing, he slowly closed the folder. Ethan's heartbeat lurched. That wasn't supposed to happen. In the novel, Adrian would dismiss him with cold efficiency because assistants were replaceable. That single signature was the first domino that allowed Ethan to disappear from the narrative forever. "Is there a problem?" Ethan asked, carefully hiding the unease creeping into his voice. Adrian leaned back. "Why do you believe staying here will get you killed?" Ethan's blood turned cold. He hadn't said those words. Not one of them. For the first time since his rebirth, something happened that did not belong to the original plot. He forced himself not to react, but a single panicked thought escaped before he could stop it. He shouldn't know that. Adrian heard it as clearly as if Ethan had shouted. His fingers tightened against the leather armrest. So it wasn't coincidence. He truly was hearing the younger man's thoughts. Ethan lowered his eyes, buying precious seconds. Every instinct screamed that revealing the truth would only create another disaster. He had survived one lifetime precisely because he understood one rule: never change too much too early. Yet Adrian was already breaking that rule simply by asking the wrong questions. "I don't understand what you mean," Ethan answered evenly. Adrian watched him for a long moment. The spoken answer was flawless. The silent voice trembling beneath it was not. "If he keeps asking, the story will change. If the story changes, what happens to everyone else?" Adrian had spent years building an empire by trusting evidence over instinct. Evidence was now telling him something impossible. The assistant in front of him was terrified before every question was even asked, as though he already knew tomorrow. Adrian picked up the resignation letter once more. Ethan secretly released a breath, believing the inevitable had returned. Then Adrian folded the paper neatly in half instead of signing it. "Your resignation is denied," he said. Ethan stared at him. That sentence did not exist anywhere in the story he remembered. A sharp unease settled deep inside his chest. If the first chapter had already changed, every future memory he relied upon could become useless. Adrian quietly placed the folded letter into a locked drawer. Another whisper reached him without permission. "No. If I can't leave now, then the book has already started rewriting itself." Adrian slowly looked up, hiding the shock behind his usual unreadable expression. He still had no idea why he could hear Ethan's inner voice. But one thing had already become undeniable. Whatever invisible story Ethan was desperately trying to escape, it had just changed because of him. Adrian Hayes did not sign another document for the rest of the morning. Instead, he found himself waiting for thoughts that did not belong to him. Every time Ethan Brooks entered the office with another report, Adrian unconsciously held his breath. Sometimes there was nothing except ordinary silence. Other times, a sentence drifted into his mind without warning. "The quarterly report is on page 12. Don't look nervous. Just make it through today." The voice was calm, almost detached, exactly the opposite of the panic Adrian had sensed earlier. It proved one thing. Whatever was happening last night, or rather, a few minutes ago in his office, had not been a hallucination. Yet another question immediately replaced it. Why did he hear some thoughts, but not others? Anything else? Adrian asked after signing a contract. Ethan shook his head. No, sir. Please don't ask me to stay late today. Adrian heard that one clearly. He frowned. A moment later, Ethan silently placed a schedule adjustment on the desk. Adrian deliberately waited. Nothing. No voice. Only the soft rustle of paper. There was a pattern here, but it remained invisible. Across the room, Ethan forced himself to breathe evenly. Nothing in his memories explained Adrian's strange behavior. In the original novel, the CEO barely noticed his assistant unless a mistake had been made. Today, Adrian watched him with unsettling concentration, as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. That alone was enough to make Ethan question every decision he had made since waking up in this world again. Had refusing to follow the original script somehow changed Adrian first? Before he could think further, his phone vibrated. The notification made his stomach tighten. Board strategy meeting. 2 p.m. In the novel, this meeting marked the beginning of the conspiracy. An executive would secretly leak confidential files. The blame would fall on Ethan, and 3 months later his death would become little more than collateral damage in a corporate war. Ethan stared at the screen for only a second before locking it. Just survive until I can leave. Don't interfere. Don't change anything. Adrian heard every word. His gaze lifted from a financial report to Ethan's unreadable expression. There it was again, that contradiction between the man's face and the thoughts hidden underneath. Cancel your afternoon schedule, Adrian said suddenly. Ethan blinked. Sir, you won't be attending the board meeting. Ethan's pulse skipped. That was impossible. Attendance at the meeting had always been mandatory. I'm responsible for preparing the presentation. Adrian closed the folder in front of him. Someone else can do it. Ethan's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. No, if I don't go, someone else will become the target. That's not how the story goes. Adrian narrowed his eyes. That sentence answered more questions than Ethan realized. It wasn't simply fear of being blamed. Ethan expected the future to unfold in a specific order. Adrian had built billion-dollar companies by recognizing patterns hidden inside numbers. Now he was recognizing one hidden inside another human being. Ethan behaved like someone who had already read tomorrow's newspaper. Who exactly are you trying to save? Adrian asked quietly. Ethan froze for half a heartbeat before recovering. I don't understand. Stop asking questions you shouldn't know to ask. Again, the silent answer arrived effortlessly inside Adrian's mind. Yet when Adrian asked the next question, nothing came. What happens at today's meeting? Silence. Absolute silence. Ethan's thoughts vanished as though someone had closed a door. Adrian watched him carefully. The phenomenon had limits. Either Ethan could control it, or something else could. That discovery unsettled him more than hearing another impossible voice. Ethan excused himself with practiced professionalism and walked out before Adrian could stop him again. The instant the office door clicked shut, he leaned against the hallway wall. His hands were steady, but only because he forced them to be. The first rule after reincarnating into a doomed novel was simple: never attract the protagonist's attention. Somehow, in less than a single day, he had broken that rule without understanding how. Inside the office, Adrian replayed every sentence he had heard. Some thoughts came freely. Others disappeared the moment he searched for them directly. That wasn't random. It felt less like reading someone's mind and more like glimpsing fragments through cracks in an invisible wall. Then his computer chimed with an incoming message from the board secretary confirming that all executives had already arrived for the afternoon meeting. Adrian's eyes lingered on the notification before moving toward the closed drawer where Ethan's signed resignation letter remained locked away. A strange certainty settled over him. Whatever Ethan believed would happen inside that meeting, it was important enough that even his hidden thoughts refused to speak about it. The board meeting began exactly as Ethan remembered, which terrified him more than if everything had gone wrong. At 2 o'clock sharp, the senior executives took their seats around the long glass table on the 31st floor, their reflections stretched thin beneath the white ceiling lights. Ethan stood behind Adrian's chair with the presentation tablet in both hands. Even though Adrian had told him not to attend, he should have obeyed. He should have hidden. But the moment another assistant had been assigned in his place, Ethan saw the first crack in his plan. In the original story, the leaked file appeared because Ethan was present. If he vanished, the plot might simply choose someone weaker. So he came anyway. Adrian said nothing when Ethan entered, but his eyes darkened with recognition. "Don't look at me like that. I am not trying to be brave. I am trying not to make someone else die for my escape." Adrian heard it, and the words settled like ice in his chest. Before he could respond, Director Caldwell stood at the far end of the table and began speaking about the merger proposal. Ethan's fingers tightened around the tablet. Caldwell, the smiling traitor, the man who would leak the files, frame Ethan, and later shake Adrian's hand at the funeral like he had lost something valuable. Ethan had spent an entire previous life never knowing the man hated him. Now he could feel the plot tightening around the room like a noose. Adrian watched Ethan instead of the presentation screen. He saw the exact moment Ethan recognized danger before anyone else did. A message notification blinked on the tablet. Ethan looked down, and his face went still. The file transfer had already begun. It was too early. In the original story, the leak happened after the meeting, not during it. "No, this is wrong. It moved faster because I tried to change it." Adrian heard the thought, then stood. Every conversation around the table died instantly. "Lock the room," he ordered. The security chief by the door hesitated only a second before sealing the electronic exit. Caldwell's smile faltered. "Mr. Hayes, is there a problem?" Adrian's gaze moved to Ethan's tablet. "Someone is transferring restricted files from inside this room." A current of shock passed through the executives. Ethan felt the world tilt. This was not how the scene was supposed to unfold. In the book, Adrian discovered the leak far too late. Ethan had been dragged into interrogation with no proof, no allies, and no way to explain why the evidence carried his access stamp. But now Adrian knew before the trap closed. That should have been good. Instead, Ethan felt a cold pressure building behind his ribs, as if the story itself had noticed the correction. The tablet screen flashed. Access ID, Ethan Brooks. A collective breath went through the room. Caldwell turned slowly toward him, regret already arranged on his face. "Ethan, why would your credentials be involved?" Ethan stared at the screen. The plot had corrected itself. It had not stopped the accusation. It had only made it happen in front of Adrian. For one fragile second, old terror swallowed him whole. He remembered the basement parking garage, the rain, the headlines, the way no one had believed in assistant over-executives with clean hands and expensive suits. "It always comes back to me." Adrian heard that thought more clearly than anything else. This time, he did not wait for the script to continue. He reached across the table, took the tablet from Ethan's stiff hands, and placed it in front of the security chief. "Trace the physical device, not the access ID." Caldwell's expression flickered. Just once. But Adrian saw it. Ethan saw it too. More importantly, the room saw Adrian choosing not to condemn him. That single choice changed the balance of power. The security chief worked quickly, fingers moving over the connected console. A new result appeared. The transfer had been triggered from Caldwell's private terminal, masked through Ethan's credentials. Silence sharpened. Caldwell's face lost all color. Ethan should have felt relief. Instead, the lights above them flickered. Once. Twice. The presentation screen glitched, filling with a corrupted version of the merger document, then with Ethan's employee file, then with a resignation form he had never uploaded. Adrian's jaw tightened. Ethan's thoughts erupted before he could stop them. The book is pushing back. It won't let the frame fail without taking something else. The room's sealed doors suddenly unlocked with a mechanical click. Caldwell lunged toward the exit. Security moved after him, but Adrian was already turning toward Ethan. For the first time, his expression was not cold or calculating. It was alarmed. "You knew this would happen," he said under his breath. Ethan looked at the corrupted screen, where his unsigned resignation letter now appeared beside the words termination pending. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "No, I knew what was supposed to happen." The screen flashed again, replacing every file name with a single line of text neither of them had written. "Return to original plotline." Adrian read it at the same time Ethan did. The invisible story had stopped hiding. The words "return to original plotline" vanished from the conference screen as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind nothing but the frozen merger presentation. Around the table, executives exchanged uneasy glances, each convincing themselves they had imagined the glitch. Only Adrian and Ethan remained perfectly still. They had both seen it. More importantly, they both knew it had not been a software error. Caldwell had already been restrained by security outside the room, yet Ethan felt no relief. In his previous life, exposing Caldwell should have changed everything. Instead, the invisible story had rewritten itself in real time, announcing that it intended to correct the deviation. It knows, Ethan thought. Before he could stop himself, it knows we've changed something. Adrian heard every word. His expression remained composed until the last executive left the conference room. The instant the heavy doors closed, he turned toward Ethan. Stay. Ethan's feet refused to move. Every instinct screamed at him to leave before another impossible event occurred, but refusing Adrian now would only create more suspicion. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. Adrian walked to the giant display wall and disconnected the presentation feed himself before facing Ethan again. There are only 2 people in this room, he said quietly. So stop pretending nothing unusual is happening. Ethan lowered his eyes. I don't know what you're referring to. Lie. Keep lying. If he knows too much, he'll become part of the story. Adrian heard the silent confession immediately. Instead of pressing harder, he studied Ethan with unexpected patience. During years of negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions, he had learned that forcing answers rarely produced the truth. Evidence did. The evidence before him was impossible, yet consistent. Ethan's spoken words and hidden thoughts belonged to 2 completely different conversations. Then explain this, Adrian said. Before the leak happened, you already knew someone would be framed. Before the screen changed, you expected it. And somehow you predicted that today's events were different from what you remembered. Ethan's breathing nearly stopped. Adrian had connected every piece far faster than anyone should have. The safest answer was silence. Unfortunately, silence also had thoughts. Because I've already lived this once. Adrian felt those words strike with more force than anything he had heard so far. He looked directly at Ethan, waiting for the younger man to deny them aloud. Ethan never did. The office remained trapped inside a heavy stillness until Adrian finally asked, "What does that mean?" This time, no voice came. The invisible wall returned. Ethan blinked in confusion. A moment earlier, Adrian had heard everything. Now there was only silence. Adrian noticed it too. It stopped, he murmured. Ethan looked up instinctively. What stopped? Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke for several long seconds. Adrian slowly exhaled. Whatever allows me to hear you. Ethan's pupils contracted. So he really knew. The impossible secret both of them had tried to avoid was now standing openly between them. Ethan almost laughed at the absurdity of it. In the original novel, Adrian Hayes never trusted anyone enough to reveal confusion. Yet here he was calmly admitting something that would sound insane to anyone else. I don't know why it happens, Ethan answered honestly. It was the first completely truthful sentence he had spoken since his rebirth. Adrian noticed the difference immediately. The hidden voice did not contradict him. Good, Adrian replied. Then we can start with what you do know. Ethan remained silent. Adrian walked to his desk and unlocked the drawer containing the unsigned resignation letter. He placed it on the polished wood between them. You wanted this because you believed staying here would kill you. Ethan's gaze fixed on the folded paper. Yes. Today's attack failed. Not really. Adrian frowned. Ethan took a slow breath. Someone still tried to frame me. The story only changed its method. The word story lingered in the air. Adrian did not interrupt. Ethan looked toward the rain streaking across the office windows. Have you ever read a novel where no matter what the characters choose, important events always happen anyway? Adrian nodded slightly. The destination changes very little. Ethan's lips curved into a tired smile that held no amusement. Imagine waking up inside one of those novels after dying once already. Adrian said nothing. He didn't need to. Ethan's next thought slipped through the invisible crack before he could suppress it. I shouldn't have told him even this much. Adrian heard it clearly. Then another sentence followed. But if I'm the only one fighting whatever is rewriting the plot, I'll lose again. Adrian looked at the resignation letter one last time before tearing it cleanly down the middle. The sound echoed through the office. Ethan stared in disbelief. That letter had represented his only escape for 2 lifetimes. Adrian dropped the torn pieces into the trash bin. You're not fighting it alone anymore, he said. Ethan opened his mouth to object, but before a single word emerged, every monitor inside the office flickered simultaneously. The lights dimmed. Adrian's computer powered itself on without being touched. Across the black screen, white letters slowly appeared as though typed by invisible hands. Observer detected. New alliance registered. Correction protocol initiated. Ethan felt every trace of color drain from his face. In his previous life, the story had never acknowledged anyone directly. Whatever had been silently correcting events until now had finally stopped acting like an unseen force. It had begun responding to them. The correction protocol did not attack immediately, which made it more terrifying. For 3 days, nothing happened. No flickering monitors. No impossible messages. No sudden accident waiting outside the elevator. Just silence, bright and clean, as if the unseen story had retreated into the walls of Hayes Corporation to think. Ethan trusted that silence less than any threat. Every morning, he arrived at Adrian's office expecting the floor beneath his life to shift again. Every morning, Adrian watched him with the same controlled stillness, listening for thoughts that came in fragments and vanished whenever they reached anything too dangerous. At first, they believed the inner voice was Adrian's advantage. By the third day, they realized it was a warning system. Adrian could hear Ethan only when the plot was unstable. A stray thought about coffee never reached him. A thought about an upcoming scene did. A memory of harmless dialogue remained silent. A fear connected to death came through like a bell. That discovery changed everything. It meant Adrian was not reading Ethan's mind. He was hearing the cracks in the story. The proof came at 8:17 on Thursday morning, when Ethan entered with a stack of revised contracts and stopped dead in the doorway. Adrian looked up. "What is it?" Ethan did not answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the wall calendar behind Adrian's desk. The date circled in red should not have existed. Investor Charity Gala. Tonight. Ethan remembered that event. Not because he had attended it willingly, but because it was the night the original plot tied Adrian to the novel's intended romantic lead. The gala was supposed to happen 2 months later, long after Ethan had already been framed beyond repair. Now it had been dragged forward. It's rushing the romance plot, Ethan thought, panic cutting through him. If the CEO meets Daniel tonight the way he's supposed to, the main storyline repairs itself. Adrian heard the entire sentence. He stood slowly. Daniel. Ethan's face went pale before he could hide it. The name had not been spoken aloud. Adrian's expression hardened, not with jealousy, but with the precise attention of a man who had found the missing variable in a collapsing equation. Is he important to the original story? Ethan gripped the contracts until the edges bent. He's the person you were supposed to love. The office became very still. Adrian did not react the way Ethan expected. He did not laugh. He did not dismiss the idea. He only looked toward the calendar, then back at Ethan. "Supposed to," he repeated. The words carried quiet contempt. Before Ethan could respond, Adrian's phone rang. The caller ID showed the chairman of the charity board. Adrian answered on speaker. A bright, polished voice filled the office, apologizing for the sudden schedule change, explaining that Daniel Vale had personally requested Adrian's presence, insisting that the gala would be incomplete without Hayes Corporation's support. Ethan felt the invisible noose tighten. This was not coincidence. This was the book trying to restore its main couple. Adrian ended the call without promising attendance. Then the calendar app on every device in the room refreshed by itself. Accepted. Ethan's breath caught. Adrian had not touched anything. The story had answered for him. That was the moment the truth shifted. Until then, Ethan had believed the book was trying to punish deviations. But punishment was not its primary function. It was not angry. It was corrective. It was moving pieces back into position, not because it hated Ethan, but because Ethan had never been written to matter. Adrian seemed to reach the same conclusion at the same time. The voice started when you tried to leave, he said. The leak moved when I protected you. Now the gala moved because I refused to meet someone. Ethan nodded slowly. Every time we create a choice the plot doesn't recognize, it exposes itself. The realization should have given them hope. Instead, it revealed the scale of the trap. If Adrian's ability was only a symptom, then the real danger was not that he could hear Ethan. The danger was that the world itself was losing control whenever Ethan stopped behaving like a disposable assistant. By evening, Adrian went to the gala anyway, but not as the plot wanted. He brought Ethan with him. The ballroom shimmered with crystal light and expensive laughter, a beautiful stage prepared for a romance Ethan had once read like a death sentence. Across the room, Daniel Vale turned toward Adrian with a smile, timed so perfectly it felt rehearsed by fate itself. Ethan felt the old script pulling them forward. Adrian felt Ethan's fear before the words formed. If he walks over there alone, the story wins. Adrian stopped. Then, in front of the entire room, he turned away from Daniel and offered Ethan his hand. Cameras flashed. Conversations died. Daniel's perfect smile cracked. For one impossible second, nothing corrected them. No glitch. No warning. No forced accident. The plot had no line prepared for this. Then every chandelier in the ballroom flickered out at once, plunging the room into darkness. In that black silence, Adrian heard a voice that was not Ethan's. Return the protagonist to his route. Ethan heard it too. Darkness lasted only 4 seconds, but when the chandeliers burst back to life, Ethan knew those 4 seconds had cost them something they could not yet see. The orchestra had stopped playing. Guests stood frozen beneath the crystal lights, laughing awkwardly as they blamed the blackout on the hotel's electrical system. Nobody reacted to the impossible voice except Ethan and Adrian. Return the protagonist to his route. Every word still echoed inside Ethan's head like a sentence carved into stone. Adrian slowly lowered the hand he had offered Ethan only. Moments before, he had not withdrawn it because he regretted the gesture. He had withdrawn it because he realized the invisible force had responded directly to that single choice. Across the ballroom, Daniel Vale recovered first. His flawless smile returned as he crossed the polished floor with effortless confidence. "Mr. Hayes," he said warmly, extending his hand. "Looks like fate finally wanted us to meet." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. In the original novel, Adrian accepted that handshake without hesitation. It was the beginning of a relationship that drove nearly every major event afterward. This time, Adrian simply looked at Daniel's hand without taking it. "Don't touch him," Ethan thought instinctively. Adrian heard the warning. Daniel noticed neither the silence nor the invisible conversation flowing between them. "I've admired Hayes Corporation for years," he continued smoothly. "Perhaps we could discuss a partnership." Adrian answered with polite professionalism, but he never closed the distance. "Perhaps another evening." Daniel's smile faltered almost imperceptibly before he excused himself to greet another guest. The moment he disappeared into the crowd, Ethan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. Adrian kept his eyes on Daniel across the ballroom. "I've begun to dislike that phrase." Ethan almost smiled despite himself. "So have I." They left the gala earlier than anyone expected. Neither spoke during the drive back to headquarters. The city lights streamed across the car windows like scenes from another life, while Ethan replayed the invisible voice again and again. Until tonight, he had believed the story corrected events automatically. Now it had spoken. That changed everything. Stories did not speak. Something inside the story did. Adrian broke the silence first. "It called me the protagonist." Ethan nodded slowly. "Because you are." Adrian turned toward him. "Then why is it reacting to you?" Ethan had asked himself the same question countless times. He had always assumed his rebirth created the instability, but another memory surfaced now, one he had dismissed as meaningless during his first life. In every chapter where Ethan should have disappeared into the background, the narration lingered just a little too long before returning to Adrian. At the time, it felt like poor writing. Now it felt intentional. "Maybe," Ethan murmured. "Maybe I was never supposed to remember." Adrian looked at him carefully. "And because you remembered, the story became unstable." Ethan nodded. "That's what I believed." Adrian remained silent for several seconds before quietly saying, "I don't think that's enough anymore." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Adrian pulled the car into the underground parking garage and shut off the engine. Instead of getting out, he looked directly at Ethan. "For days I thought I could hear your thoughts." Ethan nodded. "You can." "No." Adrian's answer came immediately. "I can only hear them before reality changes." Ethan stared at him. Adrian continued calmly. "I heard your fear before the resignation, before the board meeting changed, before the gala shifted. But after each event settled, your thoughts became silent again." Ethan replayed every strange conversation in his mind. Adrian was right. The pattern had been there all along. The voice appeared only when the future itself became uncertain. It wasn't Adrian reading Ethan's mind. It was Adrian hearing moments when the story failed to decide what came next. The realization struck both of them at once. Adrian wasn't connected to Ethan. He was connected to the fractures in the plot. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Then your ability isn't a gift," he whispered. "It's—" Adrian finished the sentence for him. "A symptom." The word hung heavily between them. If Adrian could hear only the fractures, then every voice he had heard marked another place where the invisible narrative had begun to lose control. Ethan had believed Adrian possessed a supernatural power. Now that belief collapsed completely. The inner voice had never belonged to Adrian. It belonged to the breaking story itself, leaking through him whenever destiny could no longer keep its own script intact. Ethan closed his eyes. That single realization destroyed almost everything he thought he understood. "Then we've been asking the wrong question," he said quietly. Adrian nodded. "The question isn't why I hear you." Ethan looked back at him. Adrian's expression had become unusually grave. "The question is—" He never finished. Every light inside the underground garage went out simultaneously. This time there was no ballroom full of witnesses, no music, no conversation. Only absolute darkness. Then, somewhere ahead of the car, slow footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. 1, 2, 3. Ethan's breathing stopped. Those footsteps did not belong to anyone living. He knew because he had heard them once before. Only once, in the final chapter before he died. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the car, but the darkness did not move. Ethan sat frozen in the passenger seat, one hand clenched around the edge of the leather cushion, every nerve in his body recognizing a terror his mind refused to name. Adrian reached for the dashboard controls. Nothing responded. The engine stayed dead. The emergency lights in the garage remained dark. Even the city noise above them seemed to vanish, as if the underground level had been cut out of the world. Then a pale glow flickered to life beyond the windshield. Not a person, not a security guard. A scene. Rain on concrete. A fallen phone screen. A smear of blood spreading beneath Ethan's hand. Ethan forgot how to breathe. It was his death. Not described, not remembered, not imagined, but displayed in front of them like a projection made from the inside of his skull. Adrian's face hardened. Ethan. The sound of his name almost broke him. In his first life, no one had said his name at the end. There had only been the rain, the footsteps, and the knowledge that the story had used him until it no longer needed him. The image shifted. Adrian appeared inside the projection, standing under black umbrellas at Ethan's funeral, expression unreadable while Daniel Vale touched his arm in practiced sympathy. Then another scene followed. Caldwell's scandal buried. Hayes Corporation saved. Daniel beside Adrian at the final gala, the protagonist restored to his route. Ethan watched his own absence become useful. That was the cruelest part. The story did not hate him. It simply functioned better when he was gone. Adrian opened the car door by force, metal groaning as if the vehicle itself resisted him. The moment his foot touched the concrete, the projection sharpened. White letters appeared across the vision. Correction outcome, stable. Ethan's stomach turned. "This is what it wants," he whispered. Adrian moved around the car and opened Ethan's door. "Get out." Ethan did not move. His eyes remained locked on the projected funeral. Maybe it's right. Adrian went still. Ethan heard his own voice and hated how calm it sounded. "Every time I try to leave, someone else becomes a target. Every time you protect me, the plot gets worse." It rushed the gala. It exposed itself. Now it's showing us the ending it wants. Adrian's gaze darkened. "It is showing you fear." Ethan finally looked at him. "It is showing me a solution." The words hit harder than any accusation. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, the projection changed again. This time it showed Adrian signing a document. Ethan's resignation. Not denied. Accepted. Below it, another line appeared. Assistant removed. Route restored. All casualties avoided. Ethan understood immediately. The story was offering a bargain. Not death this time. Disappearance. If he left quietly, if he returned to the role of a background character, everything would stabilize. No more glitches. No more corrupted screens. No more voices in the dark. Adrian stared at the document inside the vision. "No." Ethan gave a small, broken laugh. "You don't get to say no to everything. I get to say no to this." "You're the protagonist," Ethan said, and the old wound finally tore open. The world bends to keep you alive. I was never even a person to it. I was a function, a credential to steal, a body to remove, a mistake to erase. Maybe the only freedom I get is choosing to step out before it kills me again. For the first time, Adrian had no immediate answer. That silence hurt more than denial. Ethan stepped out of the car, legs unsteady, and walked toward the projection. The air ahead of him shimmered. A clean white resignation form materialized on the concrete floor, untouched by dust. His name was already typed at the bottom. All it needed was his signature. Adrian caught his wrist before he could bend down. The contact sent a violent flicker through the garage. For one breath, Ethan heard his own thoughts echo out loud around them, spoken by no human voice. I don't want to disappear. I just don't want anyone else to pay for me staying. Adrian heard it too. His grip softened, but he did not let go. Then don't choose disappearance and call it sacrifice. Ethan's eyes burned. The projection behind them split into dozens of possible endings, each one worse than the last. Adrian alone, Daniel smiling, Ethan dead, Ethan gone, Ethan forgotten. The story was no longer hiding its threat. It was surrounding him with it. Then every image collapsed into one final message. Sign and restore order. Refuse and lose him. Ethan looked at Adrian. There it was, the cruelest pressure the plot could create. Not his own death, not his own erasure. The fear that choosing himself would destroy the only person who had ever heard him when he was silent. Adrian's expression changed as if he had heard that thought, but no voice passed between them. The fracture had closed. For the first time since this began, Adrian could not hear him. Ethan slowly pulled his wrist free. I'm sorry, he whispered, and reached for the pen lying beside the resignation form. The pen hovered a fraction of an inch above the resignation form, but Ethan no longer saw paper. He saw two futures demanding the same surrender. In one, he signed and quietly disappeared from Adrian's life, allowing the story to stitch itself back together. In the other, he refused, and the invisible force promised Adrian would pay the price instead. Every instinct born from his first death told him to choose the safer ending. Every scar inside him whispered that people like him existed only to be sacrificed for someone more important. His fingers tightened around the pen. Then Adrian reached past the document, took the pen from Ethan's hand, and snapped it cleanly in half. The sharp crack echoed through the dark garage. For one suspended heartbeat, every projected image froze. Ethan stared at the broken pieces scattered across the concrete. You don't get to decide my future by erasing yourself, Adrian said quietly. And whatever this thing is doesn't get to decide yours. The resignation form trembled. The white paper dissolved into countless black fragments that rose into the air like burned ash. Every projection surrounding them flickered violently. Ethan watched dozens of possible endings collapse and rebuild in rapid succession. Funeral, promotion, betrayal, wedding, empty office, blood on rain-soaked pavement. None of them remained stable for more than a second. The story was searching for another route. Suddenly, the invisible voice returned, louder than ever before. Non-compliant character detected. Priority revision failed. Initiating forced alignment. The concrete beneath their feet shuddered. Hairline cracks raced across the floor in impossible geometric patterns, glowing faintly beneath the darkness. Adrian understood before Ethan did. It's not attacking us, he said. It's rewriting reality around us. Ethan looked down. The glowing lines formed paragraphs. Entire pages spread across the garage floor, sentences appearing and disappearing beneath their shoes as though the building itself had become a manuscript. Names surfaced inside the shifting text. Adrian Hayes, Daniel Vale, Ethan Brooks. Entire scenes rewrote themselves before dissolving into new versions. Ethan's pulse quickened. It's editing. Adrian nodded once. Then it can fail. Ethan looked at him in disbelief. Adrian pointed toward the unstable pages beneath them. Look closely. Ethan forced himself to focus. At first, all he saw were endless revisions. Then one detail emerged. Every version involving Adrian and Daniel remained perfectly intact. Every version involving Ethan contained corrections, deletions, overwritten dialogue, missing paragraphs. Ethan himself wasn't breaking the story. The story couldn't decide what to do with him anymore. A realization struck him with stunning clarity. I'm not outside the plot, he whispered. I'm the contradiction inside it. Adrian met his eyes. Exactly. For the first time since his rebirth, Ethan stopped thinking about escaping. If the story kept rewriting him because it no longer knew where he belonged, then disappearing would only allow it to repair the missing space. But remaining exactly as written would erase everything he had fought to protect. There was only one choice left. Not escape, not surrender. Change the story into something it had never been designed to become. The invisible manuscript reacted instantly. Entire paragraphs around them blackened as though burned from within. Error. Error. Narrative instability exceeds recovery limit. Ethan slowly stepped forward onto the glowing text. Every memory of his previous death returned at once. The rain, the betrayal, the loneliness of realizing no one would ever know the truth. For years he had believed those memories existed only to warn him away from the same ending. Now he understood they existed for another reason. They proved he had already lived through the future the story demanded. He no longer owed it obedience. Adrian watched Ethan straighten his shoulders. The fear had not disappeared. It had changed into resolve. If it wants me to become the assistant who dies, Ethan said, then I refuse. Another violent tremor shook the garage. The manuscript beneath them split apart. Entire pages tore themselves into strips before exploding into drifting white light. Adrian suddenly heard Ethan's inner voice again, clearer than at any moment before, not because the fracture had reopened, but because the story itself had begun to break apart. I was never trying to survive, Ethan thought. I was trying to avoid choosing my own life. Adrian smiled for the first time since all of this had begun. Then choose it. Ethan nodded. He took one deliberate step across the collapsing words. Then another. Every step erased another paragraph from the glowing manuscript. Every erased sentence dimmed the invisible force surrounding them. The correction protocol was no longer rewriting Ethan. Ethan was deleting its authority one choice at a time. The final page rose before him, suspended in empty darkness. Across its surface appeared a single command. Return to your assigned role. Ethan reached toward it. Instead of obeying, he tore the page cleanly in half with his bare hands. The entire underground garage erupted in blinding white light. When the brilliance finally faded, the concrete floor was whole again. The manuscript was gone. The impossible projections had vanished. Even the suffocating silence had disappeared. Only one thing remained. Adrian could still hear Ethan's voice. We changed it. Adrian's expression slowly shifted from relief to alarm because he realized something Ethan had not. The voice no longer came only during fractures in the story. He could hear every thought now. Somewhere beyond the restored garage, a calm, unfamiliar voice spoke into the returning silence. Interesting. They've finally escaped the script. Neither Ethan nor Adrian recognized the speaker. Yet both understood the same terrifying truth. Destroying the story had not ended the game. It had only revealed the author. The unfamiliar voice did not speak again, and that silence became the first proof that the old story no longer owned them. Ethan stood in the restored underground garage, staring at the empty space where the glowing manuscript had vanished. His heart was still racing, but the pressure that had followed him since his rebirth, the invisible hand pushing him toward a death he had already lived, was gone. Not weaker, not hidden, gone. Adrian remained beside him, his expression unreadable in the returning emergency lights. Yet his hand stayed near Ethan's, as if the world might try to take him again. Ethan almost laughed when he realized what he was waiting for. A correction, a punishment, a sentence written across the wall demanding obedience. Nothing came. For the first time, tomorrow was blank. The next morning, Hayes Corporation did not collapse. Daniel Vale did not appear with a perfect smile and a destined line. Caldwell's arrest remained on record. The merger proceeded without Ethan being framed. Ordinary consequences replaced narrative commands, and somehow that felt more impossible than any supernatural message. Ethan returned to Adrian's office carrying a single envelope. The same envelope. A resignation letter, rewritten by his own hand. Adrian looked at it, then at him. For a moment, the full circle stood between them so clearly that neither needed to speak. The first time Ethan had placed that letter on the desk, it had been an escape route. A desperate attempt to vanish before the story could kill him. Now he placed it there without shaking. Adrian did not reach for it. Is this goodbye? He asked. Ethan heard no accusation in the question, only trust. That made the answer harder and cleaner at the same time. No, Ethan said. This is me choosing. Adrian's eyes softened. Ethan took a slow breath. I don't want to be your assistant because the plot assigned me here. I don't want to stay because I'm afraid to leave. And I don't want to leave just because I'm afraid to stay. The old wound inside him, the belief that he was only useful when disappearing, ached once, then loosened. I want a life where every yes and every no belongs to me. Adrian finally picked up the letter. He read it carefully. Then, instead of locking it away, tearing it apart, or refusing it, he signed the acknowledgement line. Ethan felt something inside him go still. Not empty. Free. Adrian slid the paper back across the desk. Then I accept your resignation. Ethan stared at the signature for a long moment. In another life, those words would have meant survival through escape. In this one, they meant something larger. The role was over. Ethan Brooks, doomed assistant, no longer existed. Adrian leaned back slightly. What will you do now? Ethan looked toward the office windows, where morning sunlight spread across the city without arranging itself into fate. I don't know yet. A faint smile touched his mouth. That's the point. Adrian heard the thought that followed, quiet and unguarded. I'm scared, but it's mine. He did not answer it aloud. He only looked at Ethan with the same stillness that once made him terrifying and now made him feel seen. Weeks passed. The world did not become simple. Freedom never did. Ethan still woke some mornings expecting a page to turn without his permission. Adrian still sometimes heard his thoughts, but no longer as a warning from a breaking plot. They came softly now, ordinary and human, whenever Ethan chose not to hide too tightly from himself. The first time Adrian heard nothing at all, he smiled instead of panicking. Trust, they learned, did not require constant access. The author behind the voice never returned, or perhaps it simply lost interest in characters who had stopped performing. Ethan did not care. He had spent one lifetime being written, another trying to escape being written, and now he wanted to live without asking whether every feeling belonged to him. On his final day as assistant, he packed his desk into one small cardboard box. There was very little inside: a nameplate, a notebook, a keycard, and the torn half of his first resignation letter that Adrian had secretly kept. Ethan held the old paper between his fingers and remembered the man he had been when he first placed it on the CEO's desk, terrified, exhausted, certain that freedom meant disappearing. Adrian appeared at the doorway but did not cross the threshold. Ready? He asked. Ethan looked once more at the office that had once felt like a cage, then at the man who had heard him before anyone else believed there was something to hear. Yes, he said. And this time, no hidden voice corrected him. No plot forced him forward. No invisible hand chose the ending. Ethan walked out of Hayes Corporation beside Adrian, not as an assistant, not as a doomed side character, and not as someone rescued from a story. He walked out as a man stepping into a blank page, carrying the terrifying, beautiful knowledge that whatever came next would not be written for him. It would be chosen by him.